the Ron and Brian Podcast. Get ready to fill your ears with the latest news, politics, current events, and whatever else we feel like talking about this week. And now, your hosts, Ron and Brian.
And good evening, everybody. It is Sunday night. It is 8 o'clock, and it is time for episode 339 of the Ron and Brian Podcast. Tonight, as promised, is the big championship debate. Next week is the Super Bowl, the bet of which will determine who gets to hold that belt and 51% ownership of the podcast for the upcoming year. Brian wants it. He will not get it. But otherwise, Brian, how the hell are you this evening?
Excited. This is the night that we all look forward to, the night when the boys are separated from the men who are separated from my testicles. This is the night where cream rises to the top. This is the night when Ron decides to put on a green blazer under the mistaken belief that he looks good in green. This is for all the marbles. You can cut the tension in the room with a butter knife, a ginsu knife, a steak knife, Ron. We started this show as enemies. We're going to end as friends. And in between, blood will be shed, tears will be streaming, and ultimately you will be begging.
All right, fair enough. Well, then let's get rolling on things. Let's get into it, as always, with Drink of the Week.
Drink of the Week.
Na zdrowie.
Salud.
Drink of the Week.
Sláinte.
Who's?
Drink of the week. Drink of the week. Drink of the week.
All right, Brian, what did you bring to the table for your drink of the week this week?
Listen, this is the championship debate, so I will bring to you the champion of all Tennessee whiskeys. That's right, Jack Daniels is my drink of the week. However, because this is an hour-long show and there may be children watching, I'm being a little responsible. I'm going to mix a little Diet Coke in with it, which gives me a very tall glass, pinkies out, of a Jack and Coke.
I mean, you are a fan of the Jack and Coke.
Listen,
how's the mix?
I poured a little too much Jack Daniels, which means that I will be making apologies to individuals tomorrow over things that I will have said over the next 57 minutes. Ron, what is it that you are drinking this week?
Well, you know, Brian, this is a very special night, and a very special night calls for a very special collaboration. This is a collaboration of 900 breweries from Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey. They go under the name of Champ Brewers, and they have brewed up for me tonight, Brian. That's right. It's the Impotent Brian Ale. It is handcrafted. It is fresh out of the fridge. It is 7.5% alcohol. So unlike Brian, it packs quite a punch. Much like Brian, kind of pasty and white looking, very pale. And let's have a sip here, see how it is. Tastes like failure. I can't wait to have more of that throughout the evening. So I will enjoy it. Listen, does it taste like sweat and 49%? Sure does, but we have to power through these things, even if we don't like the taste.
Wow, and we are off to the races, ladies and gentlemen. Bang, right. Boom, zang. Ron, low blow number one.
Thank you. Maybe that will be your beef of the week.
Ron and Brian's beef of the week.
Brian, what's bothering you this week?
I'm going to tell you what's bothering me. Collusion. Collusion is bothering me. According to the internet, the dictionary, Merriam-Webster, Collusion is a secret or illegal cooperation or conspiracy, especially in order to cheat or deceive others. And if you want to see an example of collusion, look no further than this very podcast debate. Ron, you are the podcast champion. I never said you won legitimately. However, it was up for debate earlier this year as to who was going to be the moderator for this debate. You and I spoke. We agreed that we were going to open the floor to all applicants to be considered for moderators. However, after a secret meeting between yourself and Marty Jardy, it was decided. Don't you dare interrupt my.
I'm listening. I'm just reading the back of this can.
You're a fucker. It was immediately declared without consulting me that Marty Jardy would be our podcast moderator. This debate is a sham. It is a farce. I cannot win this debate. There has been collusion. The fix is in. It's disgusting. It's despicable. Keep your politics out of my podcast. Ron, what's bothering you?
What bothers me is when someone who, I guess, for lack of a better term, acts like a little child, dresses up like a grown-ass man with a tie and a jacket and pretends like he can compete in a battle of wits with the podcast champion. So that's my beef this week, Brian. And hopefully be better, Brian. Actually, hashtag be best. Is there anything else you would like to say before we get into this here tonight? Because
does it matter? Does it matter? Does it matter if I say anything? The very fact that you socialize almost on a weekly basis with our moderator, the fact that you travel internationally with our moderator, somehow the very people who believe in freedom are going to somehow be expected to understand that this is going to be impartial, that I have any chance to win this debate. This is an outrage. People, I demand, I insist that we all watch this with an eye for collusion, which is taking place right now as we speak, right in front of your very eyes.
All right. Well, we should get started before Brian cries all the tears he has available in his head. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is time for the 2025 debate.
It is time for the most important hour of the year, the 2025 Ron and Brian Podcast Championship Debate. In one corner, we have the defending champion, Ron, and in the other, the challenger, Brian. Words have been exchanged, gauntlets have been thrown down, and necklines have been hiked up. Who will come out on top? The ultimate debate is now. Here is our moderator, Marty Jardy.
Hello, and welcome to the second annual championship debate. Tonight, we have Ron and Brian of the Ron and Brian podcast battling it out to be the ultimate champion and win 51% ownership of the podcast for the year 2025. Along with this prestigious title, the winner will also hold on to the one-of-a-kind 18-karat gold-plated 15-pound masterpiece, the title belt. The current champion and 51% owner, Mr. Ron Podcast, will be going head-to-head against the current 49% owner, Mr. Brian Podcast. I'm your moderator for this evening, Mrs. Marty of the Jardy Party. Mr. Jardy could again not be here tonight because he still doesn't watch or listen to the show. Just like last year, these questions were inspired by viewers, some locally, some overseas. We will first hear 2-minute opening statements from our contestants with a 1-minute open floor rebuttal. This will be followed by each party being asked the same question. Again, 2 minutes will be given to answer, followed by a 1-minute open floor. We will then move on to individual questions pointed to each participant, followed by a 1-minute rebuttal from the opponent. Next up is a Would You Rather segment, followed by closing statements. Now, before we begin the actual debate, we had a few podcast listeners send in some clips. They had apparently gotten wind that there were talks of having a new moderator this year. And now apparently collusion is in question. And while I myself am impartial and have no opinion on this, there were a few subscribers who felt they had something to say. So this first clip was sent in by Stan, residing in Birmingham, Alabama. Matt, if you could please play the clip.
Stan here. Big fan of the Ron and Brian podcast. I've been for years. Sure did like that moderator Marty last year. Heard some rumblings. Y'all were thinking about getting rid of her. Trying something new. Shit. Who do you think could do what she did last year? She is fair. She is gorgeous. She asks the questions people want the answers to. Now maybe, if Ryan didn't have his Stacy mug blocking the views, and Brian stopped rambling on all the time, y'all would hear and listen more. Bring her back. Don't mess up a good thing now. She's a pretty little thing too. Hey Brian, pretty little thing. Wasn't that your nickname in high school? Ha! Hey Edna, come on, get this chicken. I'm ready for dinner. Stand out.
Wow.
Quite an impressive cock on Stan there.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I appreciate the sentiment again, but I'm only here as requested, so I'd be happy to give up my position if asked. Let's hear from our next viewer. This one was sent in by Gemma, all the way from Liverpool, England. Matt?
Interesting.
It's just absolutely preposterous that someone would want to change the moderator from last year. Who would do such a thing? Can you imagine? She was knowledgeable, an absolute vision to look at. I suppose Billy would be dying for the job. And we all know Janelle's quick with a comment on the keyboard. No. Keep it as it was last year and do what's right for the podcast. Nobody wants to wake up on Monday feeling like a tosser. Ron, tosser. Wasn't that your nickname in college? Ta.
All right, gentlemen, I think the people have spoken. I trust you will each make the right decision moving forward. And on that note, let's begin. Ron, as current 51% owner, you'll get to answer first. You'll have 2 minutes. Gentlemen, Trump is our president.
I thought we were doing, I'm not to interrupt, but I thought we were doing opening statements.
We are doing opening statements. Just kidding.
Who's running this debate? Who is running this debate? Is the moderator running this debate, or is Ron running this debate? Once again, I challenge the entire results of this debate. I challenge them.
Brian, I'm going to need you to settle that. Yeah. Opening statements. Ron, go.
Well, Marty, I would like to thank you for once again moderating this important event, despite Brian's recent and repeated attacks on your character. I would also like to preemptively apologize for my opponent's behavior over the next hour. If you are familiar with Brian, you are familiar with the vitriol, the lies, and the gaslighting that have become synonymous with his brand. I, on the other hand, would like to focus on the positives. On the last Friday of Brian's title reign, the Dow closed at 38,675. This past Friday, it closed at 44,544. A year ago, the NASDAQ closed at 15,990. This Friday, it closed at 19,627. Let's look at the world stage. During the waning months of Brian's title reign, Hamas-led militant groups launched a surprise attack on Israel, killing 1,195 Israelis and foreign nationals and taking 251 captives. During my reign, a ceasefire was negotiated and the hostages are being released. It isn't just the big issues I've tackled, but the small ones as well. I'm reminded of the story of Scott K. from Wilton, New York. He reached out to me because his wife was suffering from an addiction to chewing tobacco, going through 3 tins a day. Were we able to cure her of her addiction? No, but I was able to arrange for her to get a year's worth of manufacturer's coupon for her favorite chew, saving them thousands per year, which meant Scott spent less time rummaging through the dumpster at his trailer park for cans and bottles to redeem to fund his wife's addiction. They then dedicated that time to Scott's addictions to cucking and pegging, which strengthened their marriage. That's what I bring to the table. We'll speak to Brian and hear his tired rhetoric moving forward.
Brian.
May I speak now?
You may.
It's true. Is truth allowed to be spoken during this debate?
You are losing time.
Each year, my opponent and I take a step back from the week in, week out routine of the podcast and present to the public why we each feel we are better suited as the next podcast champion. A year ago, I was your champion, and I sat here presenting to you a podcast world that was exceeding our dreams. Our future was bright. Joe Biden was articulate, well-spoken, and rested. We were surrounded by countries that saw us as legitimate leaders to the world order. Our doors were open to all races and all 84 genders. Liberty and freedom ruled the world. Sadly, I was robbed of that championship a year ago, and the past year has been a tragedy for all of us. Ron became not just a champion, he became a champion. He embraced the far right wing, welcoming hate into power. A dark cloud swallowed our world and this show. People are afraid of what tomorrow will bring. People are struggling to afford the very groceries they need to feed their families. People are afraid of having their workplace raided by fascist, oppressive stormtroopers. People have to keep one eye in the sky to ensure that a plane doesn't come crashing down upon them. Women have lost autonomy of their own bodies. Parents are afraid for the world their children are going to inherit. This is the world that Ron has ushered in. Ron likes making wrestling references whenever possible, so he understands the importance of the four horsemen. I am not talking about Ric Flair and Tully Blanchard. I am talking about conquest, war, famine, death. We have suffered from the conquest of free people. We have seen war ravage many lands. We have seen famine starve the people. Do not allow Ron to bring death to this podcast. I challenge you to ask yourself, is the world a better place than it was a year ago? Is this podcast a better show than a year ago? Has Ron improved? How dare you cut me off? How dare this collusion? Ron had more time than I did. This is an outrage.
Now you now both have 1 minute for an open floor discussion.
Well, do I get my 1 minute rebuttal to his opening
statement?
You do.
Get your 1 minute rebuttal.
Thank you. So rather than me provide a rebuttal, I'm going to play a clip sent to me from a young woman from the village of Bricklebrackle over in Wales, talking about a time that she met Brian, and I think that says a lot about the man.
I met Brian at the Black Pig in London. He wanted to use my mushy peas to pleasure himself and insisted that I look him dead in the eyes as he did so.
So I think that really tells you about the man, his vitriol, his anger, his lies. I don't really need to rebut much of what the man says.
Brian, you have 1 minute. Anything to add to that?
Absolutely. I'm going to continue my opening statement. We deserve a champion who cares about this show, about the people, not one who only cares about the world that takes place in his backyard, one which only he gets to enjoy. We deserve a champion who doesn't hide in his house, making minorities deliver him food and groceries and then complaining about how they deliver it to him. This world deserves Brian as your podcast champion. Hashtag bring Brian back.
How does it feel to have lasted more than 2 minutes for once, Brian?
So rare. So rare.
All right. And on that note, we will now continue with the debate again. All right. Gentlemen, Trump is our president. It's here. It's where we are. Both of you seem to foresee this outcome in your predictions of 2024, as stated on the January 7th, 2024 Death, Documents, and Predictions episode. This was from Ron, quote, the Supreme Court will rule that Donald Trump will be eligible to be on the ballot in Colorado and Maine for the presidential election. This one from Brian, Donald Trump will be elected president in the November election. Even in your predictions of 2023, Ron, you had said, and I quote, Joe Biden's mental fitness will be questioned when he pardons his turkey sandwich the week before Thanksgiving, in which, Brian, you had actually sent him that article link from Breitbart. It's comments like these that have caused many viewers to fear that the podcast itself has jinxed the country or even had any kind of butterfly effect with the presidential outcome. What is your response to this? You each have 2 minutes.
Who's
Ron,
speaking first, moderator?
You go first.
Oh, of course Ron gets to go first again. There's no collusion. There's no favoritism. This is an outrage.
All right, I'm gonna need you to settle down. Let's continue with this debate. Gentlemen, Ron, please.
So I don't know that we necessarily have jinxed the country more than really seeing who the people in power are out there. I consider myself to be a man of the people. I want the people to be properly prepared and concerned about the things out there. Brian is used to hobnobbing with the oligarchs and the elite. I had this photo sent to me by an intrepid listener. This is Brian hanging out poolside with Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. And I believe you can see in the background Vladimir Putin swimming while Brian drinks his cerveza, which he's probably complaining the price is going up now because of all the tariffs being put on product from Mexico. The man that stands beside me is the man that jinxes the country. Thank you.
Brian, you have 2 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, a year ago, this country was run by the principle of freedom. Where are we now? It is a dark day for America. We wake up in fear of what our country is going to experience tomorrow. Why is that? Many people are pointing to Donald Trump, but I see him as simply a figurehead for the reality of what is Ron's championship. This is a world that Ron has imposed upon all of this. Our podcast is nothing but a symptom of the society that we live in, all orchestrated by one evil man who sits right there in his suburban home where he does not have to interact with anybody. He is not a man of the people. He does not care about anyone else except for himself and his wife.
Ron, do you have anything to add?
Well, it's very telling, the last comment that Brian made about my wife. We all know that Brian is against any consideration towards women of any kind, so it is not surprising for him to make that kind of comment. And again, he has the same tired right-wing talking points where apparently I am too incompetent to be champion of the podcast, but apparently competent enough to be part of the Illuminati and control everything that is going on in the country. Much like what most of what Brian's tangents are, they just don't make sense.
Brian, 1 minute.
The gaslighting will end. It must end. It has to end. Ron's twisting of reality, the world, my words, it needs to stop. We have a man who doesn't even leave his own house for days because he does not want to have to interact with the common person sitting there explaining to you that I, who travels outside every day, who takes public transportation, not my lily white Ford Focus or whatever fucking car he drives. He sits there and he does not interact with people. He doesn't understand the pain that the average American, the average podcast listener is experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Why? So that he can swim in his pool during the summer.
Thank you. We will get to the pool a little bit later on. We're going to move on now. Guys, this is interesting. This picture was sent in. Matt, can you please pull up the picture?
Matt, put the cocaine down. You got to work right now, okay? I believe this is the photo you're referring to.
Yeah, now this heavily indicates that you both are actually very much Trump supporters. I mean, down, guys, so the gauze bandages on the right ear. What do you have to say about this? Ron, you may answer first.
He goes first. People, this is an outrage. Not once have I gone first. This is the third question.
I will defer my time to Brian so he doesn't feel slighted. Brian, please feel free to take this.
Listen, once again, I will not be subjected to lies, to Photoshop, to a smear campaign. This photo has clearly been doctored. It has been altered in a way to make me look worse and to make Ron's thighs look larger. I will not allow for any type of blasphemy to take place. This podcast championship, this is sacred ground. This is holy. This is besmirching of me.
I asked you to be respectful. This was actually taken by a fan. So if you could be respectful to the fans, please. We don't want to turn anyone off. Ron?
So, I believe it was Rage Against the Machine who once said some of those who burn crosses work HR in construction offices. And, I think that's what you are seeing in this photo here. I had just come from an appointment at my eye doctor. My pupils were heavily dilated. It was a little sunny out. Brian said, "Oh, here, I brought an extra hat for you." And I said, it's kind of weird to just have the flap on the one ear. And he's like, it's what all the kids are wearing these days. So unfortunately, this is just another misguided attempt by Brian to make me look bad in the public arena.
All right. Well, thank you for clearing that up. I understand that the podcast has taken a strike against purchasing food from McDonald's for giving up Luigi Mangione, the shooter of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. In your episode, Deny, Defend, Depose, Ron was quoted calling Mr. Mangione a hero of the people. I think we can all agree. Guys, we have gotten a very exciting offer. One of McDonald's rival fast food restaurants has reached out and said that they would name their new chicken sandwich after Mr. Mangione, the American hero, provided that the podcast can pick a name for the sandwich, which represents America's feelings towards this martyr. Can each of you tell me what you would name this delicacy and why? Brian, you may go first. 2 minutes, please.
I would have, okay. So if you're telling me that a fast food company is going to name a sandwich after Luigi Mangione, I'm going to say one thing. No, thank you. Fast food has done nothing but poison the American people. It has subjected trans fats. We know Ron is against anything trans. So even trans fats, he's absolutely fighting. Listen, people, we need to say no to fast food. We need to eat more vegetables, get more fiber. We need to stay away from fried foods. We need to stay away from saturated fats. I would still say no to any fast food company that is looking to partnership with a podcast when I am your champion.
All right, well, we didn't get anywhere with the name of the food for that. Ron, anything we'd like to hear from you?
Again, I think it shows how out of touch Brian is with the common man. Sometimes people need an affordable, quick meal while running from job to job or raising their children. And that is what fast food provides to this country. I think the last time Brian went out, he went out for omakase, which I'm not even sure what that is. It apparently involves 2 hours and 27 courses. But I would call the sandwich the spicy backshot. For obvious reasons.
Interesting. Brian, anything to add before we move on?
That's actually a very clever name for a sandwich. So I'm going to give Ron credit on that one.
I like it.
Thank you.
That's actually real good. That's good.
Pretty good. The great TikTok ban of 2025 has already happened with a staggering downtime of less than 14 hours, throwing chaos into the social media world in the U.S. The podcast has done all it could to warn Americans about this impending catastrophe, but it came and we all endured it. Going forward, viewers have said that they want more of a presence on TikTok from this podcast while it's still here. What can you promise the fans they'll see in the year to come? Ron.
Well, I think it's very important for us to be represented in all forms of media, and TikTok is no exception. I know, many Americans did not have proper entertainment in those 12 hours that it was down. I know Brian, as shown here, for whatever reason, was going to morgues and flipping off corpses. Still not 100% sure why he was doing that or what he got out of it. But again, it's an example of what can happen if people do not have proper entertainment. So it is my pledge to bring American jobs back to America and have them work on the TikTok account for the Ron and Brian podcast.
Interesting. Brian.
I've been saying this for a year. Our social media presence has lagged behind even a dead person's corpse. That is the social media presence that Ron has brought to the table over the past 365 days. If it were not for the content that I provide almost on a weekly basis, whether it being poorly photoed dead actors who were played by Saturday Night Live cast, were it not for videos that I make after I get out of the gym, people would not even know that our podcast exists if they lived only in a social media world. Why is that? Because Ron turned his back on social media. Why? Because when a man hides in his house and spends more time worrying about when his deck will be finished, we have no social media presence. It is an embarrassment, which is why I make a pledge to the American people now that if I am your next podcast champion, we will have social media posts on a daily basis. We will have personalized videos. Our Cameo will go through the roof.
Ron, anything to add?
I would just say, in the words of Brian, I yield my time.
Perfect. All right. Fellas, this is an exciting time. Some really great news is coming to light. As of July 2024, 123 Republican members of the 118th Congress had publicly denied the scientific consensus of human-caused climate change. I'm excited and relieved, for that matter. I think that we need to get this message out there, and you two have the platform to do that. How can the podcast support this breakthrough in scientific knowledge that human-caused climate change is, in effect, fake news? Brian.
Who's answering? I am.
Brian.
Listen, once again, it is clearly obvious Ron is in the pocket of big oil. He is celebrating the fact that his stock portfolio is filled with shares of British Petroleum, of Exxon, of Gulf, of Shell. He takes money from big oil and looks the other way for climate change. He allows the environment to suffer for his own stock portfolio gains. What can we expect to happen? We know exactly what is going to happen. This world is going to come to a crash. And when that happens, me in my ivory tower, I will be looking out at the Hudson River as it boils. Ron, what will he be looking at? He'll be looking at his backyard as local Jews from Elkins Park try to jump into his pool for cooling. I couldn't come up with the word right then and there. It is an outrage that once again, even our moderator is trying to promote the belief that climate change is not real. The world, this is an embarrassment, collusion. Even Ron has gotten to our moderator.
Ron.
You know, I think what we can do to push the anti-climate change initiative is to allow Brian to keep living his lifestyle. When he was looking for a place to live, he purposely bought an ivory tower where the heating and cooling system is fueled by the burning of baby seals. The man flew overseas to London and back in 24 hours. The man's carbon footprint is immense. The amount of methane his body gives off on a daily basis, worse than I hear a field of 500 cows. So I feel just continuing to carry this man on my back, as I have for the last 38 years, is the best way to move that agenda forward.
Brian, anything to add?
When Ron says that he's been carrying me on his back, that's because that back is so wide. There's so much real estate for me to reside inside of that back. It's so nice. It's so snug. It's comfortable for me. It's better than my own mattress.
I think that's a.
When we were in college, I used to pretend I was a tauntaun, and Brian would climb inside of me.
I think of nightmares.
And I would finish 3 out of 5 times.
All right. Next, we haven't seen much new merchandise this past year. Now, this is a major marketing opportunity that's not been maximized. What new Ron and Brian podcast merch is being worked on that we can expect to see in 2025? Ron.
So we will be, we are going to market. This is something I'm very excited about. It is a new sweat whisking towel that will have Brian's face on it. We feel that those will be very big sellers. Also, for those people that are kind of clumsy, fall a bit, break bones on the sidewalk, we have come up with a logoed bubble wrap suit that people can put on to make sure that they don't hurt themselves when they're just going about their daily business. So these are 2 important pieces of merchandise that I, for one, am very excited about.
Great. Brian, what do you have in the works?
Listen, I think this is a sham. This is an absolute sham. A podcast champion who has been in charge of our merchandise shop for the past 365 days, who has not introduced one item into our merchandise store is going to sit here now and pretend that he is going to be introducing more items in the future. The very fact that you are even looking past the idea that he has ignored merchandising for the past year, and instead of calling him out on it, we are going to sit here and allow this man to have a platform to pretend that he is going to be introducing new ideas. That is an insult to all merchandisers who take their craft seriously. That is an insult to all podcasts who depend on a revenue stream from sold merchandise. The man has lied to you before. He is lying to you again, and he will lie to you in the future. Vote Brian.
Ron, any response to that?
I mean, coming from a man who has been known to skim money off the top at the merchandise tables that he's worked over the past 20 years, I really have nothing to say.
Wow.
Right.
That's a lie that you should not be showing. That's not even a joke you should be making, my friend.
Along the same line, but let's pivot a bit. We also haven't seen much this past year in the way of new sponsors. Who are you each looking to work with in 2025 to boost profits and ultimately achieve world domination? Brian.
Again, an entire year has gone by. We have not had one sponsor. Any answer that Ron is about to give is an absolute travesty. The very fact that the man has a photo lined up to use as an answer to this is a perfect example of the fact that he is filled with lies, that he is going to sit here for the next 24 minutes and lie to you. What sponsors will I bring to the table? I'm going to bring the ACLU. I'm going to bring local groups who are fighting for the rights of the impoverished, people who are going to talk about the undocumented. I'm going to bring to the table all people. That is who the sponsors are going to be. It's going to be people who are going to talk for the common person, who are going to talk for those who are not packed with wealth, those who don't live in suburbia, those who do not wear green blazers on a podcast believing that somehow it's going to make them look better. People, sponsors, that is what we live for. Also, I would like to, if it's possible, I would love to get Jack Daniels to sponsor this show. If you're watching, hashtag Jack Daniels, come sponsor the podcast.
Ron.
Well, first of all, thank you for such an insightful and important question. You
wrote this question, you son of a bitch. You wrote this question. Collusion.
The challenge over the past year, I've had a number of sponsors lined up, and there was an incident earlier this year, earlier in 2024, I should say, where Brian went over to Gaza. I thought he was going over there for humanitarian relief, but he actually just went over there to laugh at the dead bodies in the streets after an Israel bombing of a local hospital. So obviously, this was a situation that required us to lay low for a number of months. I think the work has been done. And the work is so important. And the healing is almost complete. We are lined up with a major retailer. That's right. We are ready to sign a deal with Costco to where this will become the Ron and AJ and Big Justice and Brian podcast. I am hopefully going to be able to announce that shortly. That is just one of many sponsorship deals I will keep and deliver as I remain podcast champion.
That was a lot, Brian. Anything to respond to that?
I cannot respond to lies. The man is going to sit here and pretend that he's going to water down the quantity and the quality of this podcast by bringing on TikTok stars who sit there and go boom when somebody dies. This is disgusting. We need to keep this podcast pure.
If I may rebut, we almost had Home Depot signed up as a sponsor if it were not for another incident involving Brian. And I'll let this Home Depot associate talk a little bit more about it.
I was working at the Home Depot in North Bergen when this man came in looking extremely disheveled. He was sweating profusely and had one of the highest necklines seen since Victorian England. He had a crumpled list in his hand and kept mumbling, "The light bulbs, the light bulbs. I can't return home without the right light bulbs." He then curled up into a fetal position on the ground and started to cry. It was one of the saddest things I've seen.
So as you can imagine, had that sponsor lined up, due to the actions of this man next to me, money just pissed right down the drain.
All right, guys, we could keep going there, but we're going to move on. You both continuously say that you uplift women. We did discuss this a bit last year as well, but then during the episode Domestic Beefs and Current Events, you both spent a total of 26 minutes going on about the displeasure you had with your significant others, both females, by the way, specifically discussing the topic of removal of the household trash. Ron, you had said in regards to Mrs. Ron not knowing how to open the trash can lid, quote, if she could figure out a way to order plants through the garbage can, then she would know how the trash can works. Ouch. You also had both brought up Brooke Shields speaking of her elective labioplasty and the subsequent unwanted surgery the doctor had additionally performed while she was under, which was important to bring to light, so thank you for that. But neither of you pledged to donate to the Labioplasty of Toddlers and Elders organization founded in 1887. Tell us, how do you think that this all has affected your female vote this past year? Brian, you may go first.
Oh, yeah, you're going to make me go first on that one.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. Once again, people, look through all the smoke and mirrors and understand who is getting the easier shot. By the way, I hope this goes towards my time. That this is going towards my time.
Losing time right now.
Is the clock going? Is the clock? I am losing time.
Clock is going.
He
Okay,
is,
good.
he is
Awesome.
attempting to waste
That's
time
awesome.
because he has no answers, as always.
Yeah.
Listen, I am the son of a woman. I am the brother of a woman. I am the fiance of a woman. I understand the needs of women. I understand the wants of women. I understand the struggles that women face. Over the past 365 days, can women say that their lives have gotten better? Absolutely not. I challenge one woman to step forward and to sit there and say that she has more freedom today than she did a year ago. Why is that? Now, smoke and mirrors, a lot of people are going to sit there and be like, oh, it's Donald Trump. A lot of people are going to be like, oh, it's the Republican-controlled Senate. Oh, it's the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. I say not. I say that the reason women have lost freedoms is because the man sitting right there, it is evil Ron, who has enacted a systematic approach that has robbed women of their freedoms in this country. If you give him another year, you will have lost all freedoms. It will be the handmaiden's tale every day, all day, to keep this man happy. That is your future if you allow Ron to continue to be champion.
All right, that was an interesting deflect. Ron?
Well, I think, the people have spoken as well. Billy brings up a good point. Brian is the ex-husband of two women. I am a fan of women. If you look at my company, there is a quite the diversity, quite the equal balance between men and women. If you look at the company that Brian works for, it is 97% male, 3% female. And who heads up human resources for that company but Brian himself? As far as the Labia organization you mentioned, I think I can say without hesitation that no one has been a bigger fan of Labia over the years than myself. No one has done more for Labia over the years than me. And as champion, I will continue to embrace and uplift all of the Labia out there.
Good to hear. Good to hear. Positive. All right, guys.
Positive, yes. You don't hear that from my counterpart. You don't hear positive, you hear negative. I'm the positive one of this podcast.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is Ron just get unlimited time? You as soon as he started, he just can talk for however long he wants?
The only time you can say positive about Brian is when you're talking about
ridiculous.
Hep C.
This is a zoo debate. There are the only rules apply to me. Ron can do whatever he wants, apparently. He can have unlimited time.
Moving on. The big game is coming up, which will, of course, decide who is this year's champion of the podcast. Fans are curious to know if there are any inside bets you have in regards to Jason Kelce. He was drafted by the Eagles, was an Eagles player his whole life, won the Super Bowl as an Eagle in 2018. And then on the flip side, we have his brother Travis Kelce, a Kansas City Chief. Travis has won 2 Super Bowls in a row, has beat Jason head-to-head in one Super Bowl, and now the Chiefs are up for a potential three-peat if they win this year's game. Any bets between you two on where Jason Kelce will be sitting and what jersey he will be wearing? Ron.
I believe he will probably be sitting in a VIP booth with Taylor Swift, but I feel he will probably be decked out in all Eagles merchandise.
Interesting. Brian?
Listen, when it comes to the Super Bowl, I think that we all can agree Jason Kelce is the better of the Kelce brothers. He is the realer Kelce. He is the kind of Kelce that will not flee the country. Speaking of fleeing the country, the last time Ron lost the championship bet in the Super Bowl, the man fled the country. This is not a man we can trust. When faced with the loss of his championship belt, Ron got on a plane and fled to Mexico, a country that we do not have a title belt extradition agreement with. The man flew there so that he can stay there unlimited, holding the championship belt hostage. That is not a policy that we can be okay with. When I was robbed of the championship belt a year ago, I transported it back to him legitimately via Federal Express, maybe UPS. However, I did it in a timely manner. I did it with pride because that is the man I am. That is the champion I am. I am not a champion that flees the country.
Ron, anything to add to that?
Just more obfuscation on behalf of my opponent. Brian, I'll text you the spelling of that word later so you can look it up. Yes, I did leave the country, but I was on a mission that had been planned prior to the Super Bowl bet. And unlike Brian, I continue to do my work and help people regardless, champ or no champ, while Brian just sits in his little HVAC closet, just getting angrier and angrier at the world.
Brian, response to that?
Listen, Ron will lie. He has lied before. He will lie again. The man is going to sit there and try to use fancy words in the hopes that the average American will not understand him. He wants to use words that he can email to you later so that you may possibly understand it. That is not the type of a man of the people that we, America, need. That is not a man of the people that the world needs. That is not a man of the people this podcast needs.
And on a side note, take Jalen Hurts for at least one rushing touchdown. Travis Kelce, 6+ receptions. A.J. Brown, 5+ receptions.
What do you think about Saquon Barkley with 2 rushing touchdowns?
Moving
Would
on.
you bet that? Because I have $20 on that one.
Ooh, 20? That's steep. Yeah, sorry.
It was a bonus. It was a bonus bet. Come on.
All right. All right. We will now move on to our individual questions. Ron, this first one is for you. Your wife, Mrs. Ron, had a Taylor Swift pool party in the summer. For this event, she purchased many, many items from Temu, an online marketplace that sells a wide variety of products at low prices. Some subscribers wrote in and were disappointed that the Ron and Brian podcast have not yet bought in on similar overseas child work job opportunities. You could be providing those children with jobs 23 hours a day, which not only benefits them, but would also be a huge boost to the podcast revenue. Is this lack of marketing strategy the kind of thing we should expect in 2025?
Well, again, this was something that I had been working on in 2024. Unfortunately, as some of you know, it was in the news back in April, I think. Brian was found to be running a glory hole in a childcare bathroom. It obviously, again, we needed to lie low after that, after this horrific incident, but we have it back on the table, and I would say anything is possible if I remain champion for 2025.
All right, Brian, response?
Listen, this is a perfect example. Ron has spent the past year pumping money into sweatshops, into companies that take advantage of their workers. He himself oversees a conglomerate of hotels where their staff is employed by people making minimum wage. And according to the ICE agents who have raided his hotels, people who are making below minimum wages. The Department of Labor of Pennsylvania has decided to shine a light on the hotels in Union College State, somewhere in the state where Penn State is. I don't know where the town is.
Great preparation, as always.
Listen, I could prepare either, but we all know the fact, Ron. You are sitting on top of an empire of illegal workers who you are abusing and taking advantage of. You have paid for your pool with the blood and sweat of those migrants who are cleaning hotel rooms, who are swabbing floors, who are changing bedpans. Why? Because they work in your hotels so that you can build a wider deck in your backyard. And then you're going to turn and blame your wife for it. Disgusting. I feel like I'm about to get really shit on by this next question. Just throwing it out there. I know it's happening.
Do I get a rebuttal?
How does he get a rebuttal to the question that he answered?
I don't know. Our moderator appears to have frozen.
Speaking of frozen, have we looked at Ron's hairline? It doesn't move. It has been his hairline has not changed in over 47 years that we have been doing this debate. Matt, if you are watching now, please put up our debate in 1984. Ron's hairline looks exactly the same.
The only thing I will say about Brian's accusations is the only sweatshop I'm aware of is whatever outfit is wearing in a given day.
Okay. Well,
attack me for my hyperthyroid issues. Making fun of people's physical disabilities is humorous to you? You disgust me.
All right, back to the question because I got cut out there for a second. Brian, this has been a momentous year for you. You got your first colonoscopy. Congratulations. But an even bigger congratulations on your engagement. Very happy for you both. Now, of course, we all know weddings are expensive, and you, enjoying the finer things in life, will no doubt go all out. As viewers have pointed out, if Brian can spend $900 at a strip club in one night, then what will his wedding budget look like? This is a personal, private, financial matter, sure, but there has been some apprehension that you'll be dipping into the podcast funds for this joyous event. How can you prove to the viewers that you are to be trusted with these kinds of finances?
Podcast funds? Is there an implication that there is money that is available as a result of this podcast? Sure. Ron, our current champion, has been submitting to me, your minority 49% owner of this podcast, with claims that there is zero money being generated by this podcast. Why? Because he has not spent the time in merchandising, in sponsors, in growing our Patreon. There's no money from this podcast. This is a labor of love that I spent so much time and effort every week in preparation. Ron, stop laughing. And so people can just basically trust me on this. I will not spend a penny that is not mine on my upcoming wedding.
Okay, Ron, do you have a response to that?
I think, if I will actually say this in support of Brian, if you look at his tie and jacket, he is clearly able to buy things at very inexpensive prices.
Wow. Follow-up question for Brian. For your wedding, how many podcast patrons will be invited, and what kind of all expenses paid accommodations can they expect from being such loyal listeners over the past 42 years?
Well, I think I have, that question is there's a clear answer to that. When we announced the ultra diamond level of our Patreon, where for a $10,000 a month membership fee, you are guaranteed attendance, not only at my next wedding, but also at Ron's next divorce. Those patrons absolutely guaranteed attendance at my next wedding. Anybody who has not upgraded to that ultra diamond level, that's on a case-by-case basis.
Ron, response?
I mean, the same individual who said he would not be taking a dime out of the podcast is now asking people for $10,000 a month to attend his wedding. $10,000 in this economy? I believe that's what you would spend on a dozen eggs at the moment. But this man wants you to put that money in his pocket so he can defer the costs of his wedding. Despicable. Talking out of both sides of his face.
Well, Brian, good luck with your wedding, regardless. Ron, this next one is for you. This past year, viewers wrote in very upset about the obvious decrease in the amount of new segments from the previous year. Also, that you've had an increase in occurrences of letting Brian ramble on without cutting him off, totaling 12,568 minutes, which is an 80% uptick from last year. The question has been raised if this lack of attention has been due to the ample amount of time you've spent away from working on the podcast and instead focusing on your new in-ground pool. I believe we have a picture of that final project. If you could please have Matt pull it up.
Let me see here. Yes, Matt is sending that over.
Yeah, look at that. Clearly, time has been spent here where it could have been spent on the podcast. What can you tell viewers to address their complaints about this?
So you're saying Brian had over 12,000 minutes of going off on tangents in the past year?
More so that you have not stopped that.
That number seems light, but I'll take your word on it. Listen, I sometimes priorities get shifted. Obviously, the outdoor pool was something that was very important to Mrs. Ron, so I had to spearhead that project. I did not know of anyone competent in the construction world that could have assisted me with this project. But now that the pool is built, I will secure it. I used to let a lot of people just come in. We have built the wall around the pool now, and it'll just be for myself and Mrs. Ron, and that will give me time, less distractions to focus on the podcast moving forward.
Well, it looks great. I hope you're enjoying it. Brian, anything to add?
The very fact that Ron is sitting here with a private pool and is going to talk about being a man of the people is an insult to everybody watching this podcast right now. The fact that Ron is sitting there complaining that the size of his deck is not big enough, albeit something he's complained about since college, it is an insult to every listener of our podcast. The very fact that Ron is going to sit here and debate the fact that he is a man of the people and expect anyone to believe him, to listen to him, to add any credence to what he is saying is an insult to the intelligence of everyone. And that is what we have to look forward to for another year. I say no.
Okay. Moving on. Brian, for the past few years, you have been attending the Great Chefs event, which is a benefit to raise money for children with cancer. Now, this past year, you had paid to get into the VIP section and had the chance to mingle with the upper echelon of society, yet no speeches were made or donations given on the part of the podcast. Many saw this as a huge loss of opportunity. What can you say about this?
Right off the bat, I want to say wrap it up, but that's an inside joke, and I'm going to avoid that. The truth be told is this. The Alex's Lemonade event, great something, whatever you said, Great Chefs of Philadelphia, whatnot. Yeah. Let's be brutally honest. It's not about the podcast. It's not about me. It's not about Ron. It's about sick children. It's not about us sitting there putting the spotlight on us saying, hey, Philadelphians, please pick that food out of your teeth and pay attention to me talking. It is about the sick children. There is nothing greater than I can do in that moment than to blend into the crowd, to sit there and turn that spotlight away from me and put that onto children who are fighting a scourge of society. What have we done towards cancer treatment in the past year? Well, according to Ron, we've done everything. However, children are still dying. The world is not improving. During the Great Chefs event of Philadelphia, thanks to Alex's Lemonade stand, I'm going to say this. I don't want the spotlight to be on me. I don't want the attention to be on me. I want it to be on those children and all the efforts that are being undertaken to make those children healthy again.
Understood. It just seems like a lost opportunity for the podcast. But Ron, anything to say?
Oh,
I had promised Brian that I would keep this quiet, but based on the numerous lies that he just said, he pulled me aside at the Great Chefs event, and he said, "Ron, he's like, it just occurred to me, sick kids don't have the money to join Patreon." He's like, "So fuck them kids." And I was shocked, but he had spent his own money on that particular event, and it was up to him to choose the path of behavior that he wanted to follow that day.
That is despicable. That is despicable.
It was
despicable lies.
I
Ron.
agree with you. I agree.
Despicable lies, Ron. Ron, you may lie. You can sit there in your ugly green blazer with your fucking stupid T-shirt, and you can lie, and you can make yourself feel good about yourself. And at the end of the day, the balance of security amongst the world
Mr. Moderator,
and the
he is
safety
going off
of the
he is
children
taking time
is what
away
matters.
from the important.
I will
work that
not
needs to
be
done here.
silenced. I will not be silenced.
We're gonna have to move on. Thank you, Brian. All right, Ron, your lovely wife, as we have already mentioned, is a huge Swiftie.
Have I been muted?
You have not. We can hear you.
So why does it say the host has muted you?
Maybe it's those old eyes of yours.
You are now interrupting the moderator. Again, Ron, your lovely wife, as we already have mentioned, is a huge Swiftie. Now, if Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift get married this year, what are your plans for how to navigate this event in your household in regards to the podcast? It's been speculated by some that you would need to take some time off, as much as 3 months at a time, to give your wife the amount of emotional support she'll need with all the expected stimulation. And that's just not something the fans of the podcast are willing to handle.
I think it's a matter of finding that balance in life. I think, one of the promotional items that I did not mention before is an inflatable Ron doll that will be coming out with the custom Ron's balls attachments for those if you were so inclined. I feel having that inflatable Ron doll sitting there, making it seem like it is paying attention to the various trailer conversations that go on. Is the best way to handle that while still allowing me to focus on my championship duties.
Oh, all right. Man, smart. Brian?
Listen, when Ron talks about the inflatable Ron doll, I will only insist on two things, and that are the two holes, one here, one back there. And I will take full advantage of both of those holes of the inflatable Ron doll, just like I have taken advantage of the life that is body that is Ron standing right there. I have used that hole. I have used that hole on his body, and I will take advantage of the inflatable doll just like I have taken advantage of that live body right there.
This feels like it's moving into an after dark type of...
I guess that inflatable doll, the holes won't need to be more than 2 inches deep?
Yes, but they will be easily filled just like your body.
Wow. All right. Brian, you have been a beacon of information this year, giving the people what they needed with many PSAs. You've informed the public of the serial pooper, the piss bandit, and let's not forget the Missouri pedophile who filed a lawsuit claiming he should not have to put up a sign at Halloween warning children of his sex offender status. Just great work overall, really. It does beg the question, though, why haven't you personally addressed the drones flying overhead? There's fear among your viewers that you know more than you're letting on. I'm even hearing that you could be working with the government under Trump's influence with giving false security to the people. So tell us, why give us so much this year yet hold back on this?
Because the issue of the New Jersey drones is it is a red herring. It is a way for us to sit there and not worry about what truly needs to be worried about. We have tyrants amongst us who are walking and breathing our air, who are championing our podcast. We are not worrying about that according to our mainstream media. We are told we need to worry about drones. We are told to worry about flying objects in the sky, when the truth of the matter is, what do we really need to be worried about? We need to be worried about grown men who dye their hair brown number 4 while wearing green blazers. That is the true scourge of society. That is what we truly need to be worried about. not flying objects that are simply flying up and down the New Jersey coast, taking topographical imagery. We need to worry about people who live in Philadelphia adjacent areas who feel that they are better than everyone else.
Ron.
I mean, I don't have to say it all. Our listeners do. Janelle says Brian's looking around for his win. Perhaps he's looking for, he's using drones to do so. Billy makes the great point. No drones in New Jersey until Brian moved there. I think Brian is a victim of his own hate. We have often talked about how Brian has escorted minorities off of the property where his ivory tower sits, and yet he will then seize on that minority to try and deliver him food and not be able to get into his complex, where they are forced to leave it on the steps of local grocery stores. So Brian, again, going back to that carbon footprint, is sending out fleets of drones to find out where his handcrafted sushi is sitting somewhere out around his building. Just despicable from this man.
Brian, anything to say before we move on?
Once again, Ron's answer shows that he does not understand what is going on in the world around him. He is going to sit here and pretend that this is about my food deliveries. I may order food delivery once a week, once every other week, once a month. The man sits there and makes his entire beef of the week of this podcast about the fact that his Walmart grocery delivery does not go into his alcove, but is placed outside of his alcove so that when it rains, his groceries are wet. That is not a man who is a champion of the people. This is an outrage, and people, if this is who you want as your champion, then I'm going to say something. This is not a podcast I wish to be champion of, because the future that I care about, the people that I fight for, are those who are delivering the groceries, who are delivering the DoorDash, delivering the Grubhub.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian.
Oh, I guess when Ron points to his watch, that's a cue for our moderator to step in. This is an outrage. This is collusion.
Guys, we have some more to cover here. We're going to move on. Ron, on the topic of drag queens, the podcast has yet again failed to prove that drag queens are in fact the problem. It's a shame. We were really counting on you to pull through this year. This was a picture sent in by one of the podcast fans, a lovely drag queen by the name of Rhonda Smalls. Matt, if you could please pull up the photo by our viewer.
I mean, that is a sexy drag queen. That's all I can say.
I mean, at the same time, she knows she's living in sin, and she wants to know what steps you'll be taking in 2025 to assure America that this kind of expression should not be allowed, and that it's still okay to keep permitting priests and teachers to molest children without any real changes being made.
I mean, I would have to disagree with you on this point. I know this is a line. It's a speaking point that's been very popular with Brian and his followers. But I am a man of the people, and if those people want to dress up as women, if they are men, or if they are men wanting to dress as women, I think it should be allowed. I should be encouraged. It should be applauded. Should be applauded. If someone wants to play dress up and put on a tie and a jacket and a pin and pretend like they're a grown up, we can allow that as well. We should allow people to be who they are.
Do you agree that you have not proven that drag queens are the problem?
We continue to fail at proving that talking point. Yes.
Brian.
The very fact that this podcast still has a weekly bit called The Drag Queens Are the Problem is a pure symptom, a pure result of the evil that is sitting as our podcast champion. The reality is that bit should have been put to bed a year ago. The Republican Party, the far right wing, have not been arguing about and against the drag queens for more than a year. Ron has insisted that we continue the bit, that we continue to point out that drag queens are the problem. Week in, week out, I have said to this man, listen, I am a humble person. I know I am only 49% owner of this podcast. As your minority owner, I ask you, I beg you, please, can we stop doing this bit? It is not about the drag queens. And yet he insists that we continue talking about the drag queens. We insist on pretending that the drag queens are the problem, that we insist that we sit there. Oh, am I being cut off? Ron has not been cut off once this entire podcast. Ron has not had his time cut. Every time I'm talking, I've had this cut off. This is an outrage.
Excuse me, I'm getting information, some breaking news. Hold on.
Ooh, what do we got?
All right, guys, as we have been recording this podcast, we just received some pretty disturbing information. Brian, this is coming from our viewer Stan from earlier, who took this picture of you at a party that you both had attended. Matt, if you could pull it up, please.
Wow.
Now, we can clearly see that you're shocked by what you're witnessing at one of P. Diddy's notorious sex parties, but you never reported anything. How is this going to affect the podcast now, especially if you become 51% owner?
Okay, you are not understanding the photo that you're putting up here.
Oh.
This look on my face is not of one of shock. This is a look of reception. This is a look of receiving.
It's a word of reception. He's about to receive Jay-Z is what's about to happen.
Thank you. I do not sit here and judge how other people express their love. As somebody who lives in lily white suburbia, I can understand Ron looking at this photo and sitting there saying, "Oh, there are sex crimes being committed right now." I understand that there are people of all shapes, of all sizes, of all races, of all genders who sit there and express their love differently. Maybe I express my love by opening my mouth at exactly a nice size that would facilitate the girth of a very wide man. We're not here to judge.
Is that Stan I see in the background there?
That is Stan, yeah.
Then it's got the photo's got to be legit. Is all I can say.
Yeah, it's. Ron, do you have anything to respond? I mean, this is just very unsettling, very disturbing.
Well, listen, ironically, it's one of the least disturbing things about this man. There is a litany of things. His hatred of women, his hatred of minorities, his support of Hamas. I mean, there's a lot that he has done over the past few years that has been more disturbing than that. Again, we do not kink shame here. We're not going to kink shame Stan. We're not going to kink shame Brian. But I think it's just the people can see who this individual is.
Okay.
And I have to agree with Janelle. It's a disturbing picture of Brian. No other way around it.
I feel judged. And this past year has been a podcast year of judgment.
All right.
Okay.
We will now start our Would You Rather portion of the debate.
Ooh.
Ryan, one of the podcast stories of the week was about a girl who was found dead in a walk-in bakery oven. Would you rather eat an entire box of pastries cooked in that oven after her charred body was found, or have your only food source for one full year be that of food remnants that your fellow Ivory McWhitey neighbors have dropped in your community pool? Tough one.
That is a tough one. And I got to give you credit on that one. That's a great question. I'm going to say this. I do believe that the United States Food and Drug Administration has corrected the exact temperature that an industrial oven properly cooks food. I'm going to say, as an answer to your question, that I would rather eat out of that oven that has properly cooked a Walmart employee. I thought it was. Could be somebody else. Walmart, was it not? Where did she work?
I believe Walmart, yes.
I thought she worked at the Scholar Group, hotels. Scholar Hotels, no? No, sorry.
The Hudson Meridian, I think.
Ooh, that hurts. I'm going to say this. Once the temperature gets up to 4,000 degrees, I think anything comes out of it is fair game for human consumption. So I'm going to say that I would eat out of that industrial oven.
All right. Ron, next one's for you.
Yeah.
Would you rather Drink a full 6-pack of the Mountain Dew beverage you endured on Drink of the Week, which you had trouble keeping down, or take a shot of Brian's sweat after he's been walking in 95-degree weather in the midst of summer in New York.
Hands down, I'm going with Brian Sweat because that was one of the main components of this Infinite Brian beer. So I already have a taste for it.
All right. Man has spoken. Brian, would you rather go to Bryant Park every weekend in December from sunup to sundown, enduring hours upon hours with lines of people who are all documenting experiences they have seen on TikTok and doing nothing new for themselves? Or would you yourself rather start a significant reno project in your ivory tower, learning to do it all from scratch with your bride-to-be watching and commenting on your every move?
Listen, one thing I showed this year during my visits, plural, to the Bryant Park Holiday Jamboree, as I like to call it, is the fact that I am selfless. I showed up to that park knowing how painful it was going to be for myself. And I sat there and said, listen, you guys want to go shopping and you want to have the Dubai chocolate covered strawberries. And I was willing to sacrifice my time, my personal pleasure by waiting in line for over an hour so that Ron's wife could have Dubai chocolate covered strawberries. What does that say? I am selfless to my friends. I am selfless of my time to those that I love. And I will continue to be selfless as your podcast champion.
You still did not answer the question.
Listen, if this was about answering the question, we would have ended an hour and 14 minutes ago when Ron showed that he's incapable of answering any question. I refuse to allow to be held to a standard that is not being asked of my opponent.
Okay. All right, then. Ron.
That was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. Woo.
Ron, would you rather finally leave your wife? Hey.
Sorry.
Would you rather finally leave your wife and embrace the furry community, or drink 6 shots of Brian Sweat after he's been walking in 95-degree weather in the midst of summer in New York?
I mean, well, first I will say, Brian, as you answer your questions, please keep in mind the Super Bowl is only 1 week away. I would like this debate to be wrapped up by then. Second, once you've had 1 shot of Brian Sweat, the other 5 just go down nice and easy.
All right, guys, finishing up. Gentlemen, it's time for your final statements. Ron, you'll be going first, and Brian, you'll be following. 2 minutes each with a 1-minute rebuttal. Ron?
In lieu of me giving a closing statement, I reached out to one of our followers and said, can you give us a synopsis of what you felt Brian's first title reign was like, to remind the people of what they can expect should Brian hold this beautiful title a week from now? And this was what he said to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have seen dark times in history: the Great Depression, the Y2K panic, the invention of pineapple pizza. But nothing compares to the suffering this nation endured during Brian's podcast title reign. It started innocently enough. He said he'd be a humble champion, a giving champion. But soon, Brian's voice was everywhere. Spotify, YouTube, your mom's voicemail. There was no escape. He called himself the People's Podcaster. But let me tell you, the people were suffering. Rush hour? Traffic reports were replaced with Brian's top 5 motivational quotes. Airports. Flight delays weren't due to weather. They were waiting for Brian to finish his latest solo episode. Family dinners? Nobody could pass the salt without first being interviewed for his Real Talk segment. And the speeches. Oh, the speeches. Every conversation became a TED Talk. You couldn't order coffee without getting a 20-minute deep dive on the history of caffeine and its role in the hero's journey. But then, salvation. The sponsors pulled out. The subscribers dropped. Brian finally uttered the words, San Francisco minus 2.5 points in the Super Bowl. And just like that, the nation was free. We celebrated. We moved forward. And we prayed, oh, we prayed, that Brian never regains the belt.
So, in closing, Let's not head backwards. Let's only move forwards.
All right. Brian, final statement.
Ladies, gentlemen, and all other genders, today I have demonstrated beyond a doubt that Ron sucks. It is the only logical, ethical, and practical choice that you have facing you. My opponent, our champion, has attempted to argue that I am not the future of this podcast. However, his reasoning crumbles when we consider that my most recent podcast championship reign brought a period of enlightenment to all the lands. Furthermore, his argument failed to address that his hair dye color of choice showed any level of intelligence. This is not just a matter of debate, it is a matter of justice, of fairness, and of progress. If we fail to acknowledge the dark days that we have all suffered from for the past 365 days, we risk the reality of suffering from another 365 days. I said to you earlier, ask yourself, are you better off today than you were a year ago? Maybe Ron is, with his stock portfolio that he has simply copied from Nancy Pelosi. Maybe Ron is, with his own personal pool in his backyard. Maybe Ron is, with his personal deck connecting his house to his pool. However, are you? Are you our podcast fan? Are you our podcast Patreon subscriber? Are you better off? I'm going to say probably not. If you allow Ron to continue being our podcast champion, do you expect to be in a better position a year from now? Logic says no. The choice is clear. The facts support me. The logic compels me. The future depends on me.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
You can each take 30 seconds to respond to each other before we move on to our last short segment of the night. Ron, anything to say?
I think, the number of times that Brian said me in his closing statement says it all. He wants it to be all about him and not about the people. And I think we already have somebody in power that feels that same way. Let's not have another one.
Brian.
Look at this little piece of shit. How can you support a man that literally wants to sell this on our merch store? How? How can we accept that that is our future? We can't. Vote Brian, vote progress, vote our future.
Did you keep that sticker this entire time just for that?
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out how voting is involved in this entire process.
Right.
Oh, because Ron is champion, you have stolen voting from the people.
All right, fellas, lastly, as you both know, Kendrick Lamar will be the entertainer for this year's Super Bowl halftime show. Fabulous. It'll be fun to watch. To close this debate out, you will both do a freestyle diss rap off to the track of BB Drizzy, each for 15 seconds, which neither of you knew until right now. Ron, as current 51% owner, you will go first, my friend. Matt, please play the track, and Ron, diss off.
Brian is sweaty. Oh. Brian talks too much. His tangents go nowhere. Oh. Thank you. And I mean that from my heart.
All right. And go for Brian.
Ron is a bitch. He does. Did I lose the music?
Hold on.
Do I not get the same level of? Ron's a bitch with little balls. Ron's a little bitch with little balls. He's got tiny balls. So does his wife. He's got little balls. Little balls.
That was definitely something, fellas. Way to finish hard. Finish hard, which was my nickname in college. That's all from me, everyone. Thank you and good night.
All right. Thank you. A nice round of applause for our
Absolutely.
moderator, Marty Jardy. Brian, there is only one thing left to do before we wrap things up. As people know, this comes down to the Super Bowl bet. I lost this 2 years ago, Brian, betting on the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs. Ironically enough, here we are again with these Eagles back in the game. But I will say I am not afraid to put my faith in the people of Philadelphia. My Super Bowl pick for this upcoming Sunday is Philadelphia Eagles plus 1.5 points against those Kansas City Chiefs. Let's bring it home. Let's keep this title around my waist for one more year. Brian, anything else before we wrap this up? Just another outstanding performance by our moderator, without a doubt.
I've got one thing left to say, and that is three-peat. Three-peat. Pat Riley makes money every time I say it. Three-peat. Three-peat. Go Chiefs!
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us for the debate. Check us out next Sunday night when we find out if I will remain champion or if the belt falls into dark days. See you next Sunday.
Thank you for joining us on the Ron and Brian podcast. We're live each week on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. You can find prior episodes, links to our social media, and everything else Ron and Brian at ronandbrianpodcast.com. See